very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Ákos Bence, Head of Communications and Foreign Affairs of Danube Institute, and I am pleased to introduce the fourth panel of the conference of Danube Institute, co-organized with the Austrian Economic Center in the framework of the Free Market Roadshow. This panel deals with China and tries to answer multiple questions, as the title also suggests. What will be China's role in the post-war and post-COVID world, and how will it impact the EU's place in the world politically and economically? Our speakers definitely will not have an easy task, because they have to answer questions which relate both to the present, to the past, and to the future. The role of China in world politics has been a current topic also before the mentioned crisis of COVID and the war in Ukraine. The West had a complex approach to this matter. On the one hand, everyone has been seeking good economic relations, good economic cooperations with this leading economic power of the world. On the other hand, some countries, such like Hungary, used to be criticized because they are tightening economic relationships with China. In 2021, the idea of the Hungarian government of establishing Chinese University Fudan in Budapest led to protests from the opposition parties willing to organize a referendum against this question. I remember that at that time I was visiting the website of French famous university Paris Panthéon-Sorbonne, which I graduated from, and on the English version of the website I found the logo of Fudan University. There is no doubt that in like many matters, we can witness double standards in Europe. One member state can seek cooperation with China, others cannot, or at least if they do so, they are heavily criticized. At the same time, we should admit that the Chinese question is a complex one, and somehow the contradictory approach of the West is understandable. China managed to be a leading economic power in the capitalist world economic order, although they have a political regime completely different from Western democracies. The complex role of China was hard to understand even at the time when we had an established world order. Obviously, it is even more difficult to understand when we are talking about a new world disorder. The foreign policy of Hungary, ladies and gentlemen, during the last 12 years focused on building good cooperation and relationships not only in Europe, but in all parts of the world. As Prime Minister Viktor Orbán put it, the center idea of the Hungarian foreign policy was to reach a situation in which as many foreign countries as possible become directly interested in the success of Hungary. Economics offered an excellent way to arrive to such a win-win situation, and it is not an hazard that the Hungarian Ministry of Foreign Affairs is called in reality and in fact the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. However, the world is changing and experts are talking about a possible restructuration of leading blocs in a multipolar world. Now the question is if the policy that obviously worked during the last decade can be continued, or should it be reshaped, or even should it be completely changed? What are the lessons and the impacts of COVID pandemic and the war in Ukraine? How will the role of China evolve, and how will this impact Europe? And we could also ask as a question, what can Europe do to influence the direction towards which China will develop? These are definitely complicated questions, but we have a good chance to get clear and appropriate answers and forward-looking thoughts from our distinguished panelists for this fourth panel, which I have the honor to introduce. First, let me present Zhao Schoolland, founder of TFT Events and representing the Acton Institute in Asia and Pacific countries. Mrs. Schoolland survived 26 years in Mao's regime in China. This motivated her to a lifetime of promoting freedom and liberty globally through the organization of Austrian economics and entrepreneurship conferences and summer camps over decades in Europe, Asia, the Pacific region, and North Africa. She arranges translation and publication of libertarian literature in China and coaches parents in raising liberty-minded youth. The second panelist is Ádám Kerényi, Hungarian economist who is analyst at the Ministry of Finance and a research fellow at the Institute of World Economics of Center for Economic and Regional Studies. His research interests include financial stability, innovation, political economy, and public policy, and he studies the effects of the technological war and the digital transformation on legislation as an external visiting fellow in the Center for Social Sciences, Polecon. He was a visiting researcher at the Vietnam Academy of Social Sciences Institute for European Studies and the Chinese University of Hong Kong. The discussion will be moderated by Gergely Salát, Senior Research Fellow of the Institute of Foreign Affairs and Trade and Head of Institute of International Studies and Political Sciences at Pázmány Péter Catholic University. In 2006, he defended his PhD thesis entitled System of Criminal Law of the Ancient Chinese State of Qin. He has been teaching Chinese language, Chinese history, literature, philology, politics, and history of Taiwan. His main research area is the history of Chinese law and institutions, as well as contemporary Chinese politics and society. So, thank you for the panelists to being with us today, and I wish you an excellent discussion.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting us, and thank you for this introduction. Ákos has listed many questions for which I don't think we have the answers, and I also have many questions for which I don't think we have all the answers, but we will try to answer at least some of them with our distinguished guests, both of whom will, at the beginning of the panel, have a short presentation. Ádám will also have a PPT presentation, and then I will raise some questions regarding the presentations and regarding the questions we have heard and I wrote before. And at the end of the panel, I would like to ask the audience to take part in a Q&A session, and I hope we will have answers for at least a few questions. So first of all, I would like to ask Ádám Kerényi to hold his presentation.
Thank you so much. I hope that you can hear me. I hope that it's not impolite to be the first speaker in a panel where there is a lady presenter too. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very proud to be here, and thank you. The first words goes to the organizers. I really appreciate their kind invitation. Actually, I'm from a city called Szeged. János mentioned this city during the second panel, and I met János Kornai in a class at University Corvinus a couple of years ago, and then later I became one of his research assistants. And he was very popular in China, actually, and also other countries too. Unfortunately, he passed away last year, and in Paris we had a conference to honor him this January. I attended that too. So János Kornai was a social scientist. He preferred to study the system as a whole, and also he preferred the dynamic approach, not just the static one. And he was a liberal economist in the European meaning of the word, and he was very solidar with those who were needy. And also he was a true Democrat, opposed autocracy and dictatorships. And a couple of his last papers were focusing on China and some ethical, moral challenges. One of the previous presenters mentioned that it was only Nixon who could go to China and to make a pact with the Chinese. Actually, there was a very famous boat conference called Bashan Conference in '85, where, among others, János Kornai also attended. And you can find a very interesting book called Unlikely Partners, which was written by a Harvard scholar, later Columbia scholar. Now he is a member of the Biden administration. He is the China director of the National Security Council, called Julian Gewirtz. He discussed this boat trip very with details. This was about a couple of economists were invited to China and to ask their opinion, their advice, how China could make a shift towards the market economy. And I wanted to mention that the title of this conference is a roadshow to the market economy, Road to Freedom. Hayek wrote a book called Road to Freedom, and Kornai also published a book entitled Road to the Market Economy. This is an idea which came up to mind during this event. So he convinced the Chinese decision maker to to adopt radical changes. But at the end of his life, he decided that it was a mistake because he advocated plans. And now, as I mentioned, that he was very solidary with the needy, and we can observe that in China, many people from the poverty became to the middle income. But his last article were about the Frankenstein, and he called himself a Frankenstein. He contributed to a monster like this country. My contribution to this panel is mainly for the European Union and Chinese relationship, and preparing to this speech, I found a very interesting paper which referred to Romano Prodi's speech, which title was Between China and the EU, there is more than just love. Some authors refer to this code of marriage, and these are a couple of scenes from a marriage. Now we can see that after 20 years, 20 ans après, if we can say that many things have changed, and not to the good direction. So it's not anymore a happy marriage between China and the European Union. The first relation were started almost 40 years ago. And there is a very famous published article, policy paper from the European Commission, which mentioned the first time that China was a systemic rival to the European Union, not a partner, not a husband or a wife, but rather a rival. And last year, they decided to put many things back in order to reduce the dependence on China in the European Union regarding strategic fields. And if we analyze the relationship, we can state that this is an unbalanced relationship which favors China. And China wants mainly three things from the European Union. First of all, free access to the European Union single market. And the second one, for investments. Nowadays, there are huge debates on the capital investment agreement with the European Parliament. And also, they are looking for a diplomatic companion against the United States. The last meeting, which occurred just 3 weeks ago during the war, they still mentioned that they only want to keep this strategic opportunity, this partnership, and to look for mutual beneficial relationship with the European Union. There was the picture that I showed earlier. What about the European Union? We can see here a slide, some data which was mentioned by Bretzel from the second panel, that there was a dream, and many people, many politicians just wake up from that romantic dream and started to invest in defense. And this slide, this data shows the last year before the war, how the countries spent it on defense. And you know that there is the 2% ratio, here, and we can see that only a couple of countries among the European Union members which contributed to the defense by more than 2% of their GDP. The European Union overly depended on external partners like Russia on energy. We discussed this topic earlier. Also on China, and I'm going to show data next slide regarding the export, and also depending on the United States for the security. But many things have been changing. Many taboos are not in order anymore. Let me refer to the Nordic Stream number 2, the decision of the Russia-proof energy supplies, huge investment in new LNG terminals, and the defense fund, and also the army troop which are going to be sent to Ukraine. And this is the data that I wanted to show. Maybe you are not able to see it from distance. I found it in the Volkswagen annual report, Volkswagen AG annual report, and we can see that more than 3 million passenger cars have been distributed and sent only in China. 2008 was the first year when the Volkswagen AG reached 1 million passenger cars, which were sold to China. And that is the data. Here you can see that Germany is the biggest exporter, but also Czech Republic and Hungary and Slovak Republic also, and Poland. There is a famous reference to Kissinger, because when he wanted to speak to Europe, he didn't have the telephone number of the Europe. But in the literature, I found that Chinese succeeded to find the phone number of Berlin, the Chancellor of Germany, and actually it was Germany there was the elephant in the room regarding the sales in the Chinese market. And there are FDI data reached historical records last year between the two countries like China and Germany, and it is increased by 15% last year. But not only Germany profited from the Chinese market. As János Csák mentioned, also Ukraine started to deal with China and signed huge businesses like the train hub next to the Hungarian border, which was mentioned by János Csák. And also there is some countries from the East and Central European region, and also Italy from the G7 joined to the Belt and Road Initiative, and more countries were very happy to make business with China. And also European Union just started to reply by introducing its global gateway strategy, which might be an answer to the BRI. Okay, these are my last slide. You can see that people are now, it's getting more and more in debating what should Europe do and how should they implement sanctions on Russia. And many people started to ask whether not China is going to be the next country which is going to be the victim of sanctions. But we cannot say it nowadays. But we can, as I mentioned before, that there is a huge shift in the German politics, and they mentioned that they don't want to be naive any longer, and they should say goodbye for their long-time world responses. And this is the takeaway message that I wanted to show, and this is back to János Kornai. You can see many Chinese students of him from Harvard University, and I think that this could be very useful, this approach for the future. If we want to discuss China, we should not only focus on only economic or legal or social terms, but there should be a holistic view, and we should try to understand China, because it is a completely different animal. And I'm looking forward to the next presenter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ádám. And now I would like to ask our second panelist, Zhao Schoolland, to hold her presentation.
Aloha. At the airport today, the person I met just randomly told me aloha. I said, what? How did you know? He said, I just like to say this word, but it just happened I'm from Hawaii. That's how we greet people, aloha. But before I moved to Hawaii, I was made in China. I lived in China for 26 years. Personally, I experienced the Great Leap Forward, the Great Famine, the Cultural Revolution, and reform and openness. I left China in 1984 to United States. I'm not an economist, but what I'm saying from a perspective of a common person with a sense of economics. So what I'm going to talk about is the word we started to say among Chinese dissidents. China is the paper tiger. This legend, actually not legend, this word was first used by Mao Zedong in 1946 to American leftist journalist. And what he's trying to say is all the developed countries, regardless how strong and powerful you look, you're only appear to be powerful and strong. You're vulnerable, you're hollow inside. We can just beat you. So for more than 70 years, paper tiger is the synonym for Americans, mostly for United States, but also sometimes it's for Great Britain, the German, the whole Western free countries. Oops. I thought when I was growing up in school, we always refer the West, especially the United States, the paper tiger. I thought people stopped using it, but I found out they're still using it today. The other poster is 2021. So they're still telling the Chinese people, the government telling the Chinese people, Americans are our enemies and they're just really fake. They're not strong at all, so don't be afraid of them. So why I say the Chinese economy is paper tiger. First of all, I want all of you to remember this. When you talk about economics, talk about the terms. For example, inflation, GDP, unemployment, national debt, minimum wage, unemployment, taxation. In China, we use these words, but totally different definition, not the same at all. So you cannot have a academic economic conference and use these words and refer to the economy in the developed countries and the economy in China. I will explain a little bit because I have a limited time, so I will not elaborate too much. This is today when you go visit China, you see Shanghai, Beijing, Tianjin, Shenzhen, these beautiful cities, more beautiful than probably London or New York or Paris. And most people who visited China, that's what they see. And they see a lot of people have very big buying power. And those luxury stores and everything costs so much because in China, luxury goods cost more 30-40%, sometimes 100% more because the tax. But people still buying. They're lined up outside these luxury store shops and buying. And so they thought China is such a great economic power. It's developing so fast and better than most countries in the world. Then they go home and they write about it. Not just the reporters and business people, some academic scholars. They were just so impressed with China. But for some people, one is they didn't get to see others because they're not allowed to travel to other places in China. And Chinese people will never tell the foreigners truth. And or they got treated so loyally, like royalty in China. 5-star hotel, the most expensive food, and they had a good 5 days, 1 week, and then they go home. They think China is just incredible. But in reality, it's not, because this is not 70 years ago's picture. These are the picture of today. And in the big part of China, this picture is not by secret camera. It's by I got those from the official website in Chinese government. The poverty line set by the Chinese government is 95 cents per person per day. And why they have those pictures is this also government official map. Is Xi Jinping in 2017, he said we have to raise war against poverty. And everything he said is just direction for economic development and for everybody's action. So that time he said we have to bring people out of poverty, which means if you are making $1 per day instead of 95 cents, you're out of poverty. So they published this map to show the progress. And but I use it in backwards. That shows me how many people in China still living under $1 a day. And we all know in China, nobody trusts government media because all the media owned, controlled by the government. The reporters, we call them their actors, because they're only there to read what's given to them, and they cannot say anything other than what's on the paper. They cannot do investigation reporting, just no freedom of press. So I start using their official data from different perspective. So I want to focus on 3 reasons why Chinese economy is not a solid economy, it's not sustainable, it's not because China never had a true market economy. And they have a capitalist economy, state capitalism. They have state capitalism. And from when I was in China, that was total planned economy. Now they have planned economy plus controlled economy. So the first, the CCP, let's see. Okay, I cannot read there because I have to come here to see. The Chinese government-owned or government-controlled businesses is 62% in China, more than 50%. And even if it's not government-owned or government-controlled private businesses, the government will still send party representative, party secretary to your company. And that person, you have to pay that person to monitor your businesses. And your business decisions cannot be made solely by your own business owners or stockholders or board of directors, whatever. You have to get approved from the central government. One time I asked the Chinese people, I said, why there's almost no inventions in China? Only copy. Chinese people love to copy. It's not because they're not smart, they're not educated. The answer was really simple. Everybody, I asked several people, they all say, because everything we thought about it, we have a new idea, we have to get approval from 10, 20 layers of government officials. By the time it got approved, if get approved, it's too late already. Most of the time, it doesn't get approved because the party leaders doesn't understand all these things. So we don't go through the trouble to have a creative ideas or innovations. We just copy. That's the safest thing. So we can make money fast. So the second element is investment. All the Chinese banks owned by the government. There's no private banks. And the government bank only focus on investing in government-owned businesses or government-favored businesses. If you say you want to open a small store or restaurant, only thing you can do is to raise funds from the family and friends. You cannot get a loan. But there's a lot of underground money shops, charge very, very high interest. A lot of people, because they didn't make it profitable for their business, they got into debt by the day, not by the year, by the day. And they bankrupt. They were just in really, really big trouble. So even the foreign investments always follow the direction of the Chinese government. For example, Chinese government have 5-year plan all the time, every 5 years from the beginning, like 1980s. When I was working in China, I was working for the Department of Transportation. That time, early 1980s, the government focus is building infrastructures and heavy machineries and automobile. So my job with small team, we're building the first freeway of China. That time, all the investment pour into these sectors. The Chinese domestic investment and foreign investment. I remember all the technology and money from Germany and Japan for our freeways and things like that. And then they throughout the years of these 40 years of development, they changed from housing to high-tech is today. But this also very political. Let me give you an example. 1989, Deng Xiaoping ordered the tank to get into Beijing and killed thousands of students, protesters, and innocent people. Then the whole China was sobering and so sad. Everybody started asking questions, what's going on, what happened? So the government said, okay, our focus is guide the people into materialism. So they focus on investment, building luxury stores, restaurants, and introduce luxury goods to China. And their propaganda was always showing somebody driving really luxury cars and dressed expensively and having a beautiful homes. So the state government propaganda focus on that, and they get investment from the West, especially Europe, those brand name stuffs, flooded in China because they got government support. So people changed their focus. They say it's safer to focus on how to make more money and can afford $1,000 or $10,000 handbags. They were very successful. At the time, also, a lot of people was unhappy. They start practicing Falun Gong as a kind of meditation to increase health. And Chinese government cracked that down because they gather too many people. They are threatened. If anything, it's not because of teaching. Just like Christian, it's not because of teaching. It's just because of large number of people gathering and listen to one leader. They cannot allow that to happen. So they're breaking down these things. So also, at the same time, they're directing people into become very materialist. And we're talking about debt. And in China, also, there's a different concept of a GDP. Or number one is not real, what you read. And inflation, every time I went to China, I go to China a lot, sometimes every other month, up to 2019. And I said, what's the inflation this year today? Oh, nobody knows. That's top government secret. And everything is government secret, even the Constitution. One time I was just walking in a nice area in Hangzhou. I saw a beautiful, newly built but traditional style building. I love architecture. So I went there to take pictures. 3 guards rushed and shushed me out. Leave. I said, so I saw the banner said, 1954 Chinese Constitution Museum. I said, well, this is a museum. Why can't I take a picture? I'm not even going inside. I just take a picture outside. No, this is national secret. You can't even come near this building. I said, since when a Constitution Museum become national secret? Oh, they were about to arrest me. So my friend said, go. You're too foreign westernized. Go, run. So, Chinese economy is very vulnerable today, and they're extremely short of cash, extremely short of hard currencies, because China's trade, more than 70% is using US dollars. And also, because China is planned and controlled economy, all the business people follow Xi Jinping's thinking, not even know just guessing. He's thinking about this, let's do that. So one period was housing development, foreign investment, domestic investment, all in the housing. But 25% of Chinese GDP is housing. Residential and commercial housing. Among all the developed housing sectors, 20% of all Chinese housings are unoccupied. We call Ghost City because they just think maybe that's the way to go and a way to make quick money, to get bribes. And so they build and build and build, and nobody lives there. And there's a lot of high-speed rail going to nowhere. And because there's no responsibilities when they do things. So there's a lot to talk about it, but I don't have much time anymore. So I will not, you can ask me questions after. And so this is summarize the Chinese, so-called Chinese model. You often hear about Chinese model. I say there's no Chinese model. And there's no Chinese miracle either, economic miracle. Deng Xiaoping didn't do anything. Only thing he did is stop doing things. That's how Chinese farmers become rich, not become rich, out of poverty, has food to eat. Just stop telling them what to plant and stop telling the factory what to make. And that's all they did. So a lot of people thought that's a miracle, but I don't think it's a miracle. So the first one, the mess left by the previous empire, that's Mao. So Deng Xiaoping did what? Is to, you have this problem, we solve this problem. You have that problem, we solve that problem. Just like you have a headache. Instead of checking out, do you have a brain tumor? Do you have what's happened? What's caused you a headache? They don't care. They just give you some painkillers, so your head is gone. And that's a typical Chinese way of saying headache, treat head, foot ache, treat the feet. Don't ask what's the cost. So a lot of people thought problem solved. Especially not just the Chinese people, outside thought China is out of poverty, it's no longer communist. No. It's not, that's why the party is still in control. China still is a communist country because they never solved the fundamental problem is the communism. And so the third generation was Hu Yaobang, Jiang Zemin, mostly Hu Jintao, I'm sorry. You have headache, treat your face. You have foot ache, treat your face, because face is more important. China already had a face in the international arena. We are great, we're developing, we have China miracle, everybody is happy, so we have to protect that. We cannot let people think we have problems. Okay, now Xi Jinping is currently, no, regardless where you hurt, as long as you don't say it, the government put a mask on you, then there's no problem because nobody's talking about it. So that's the current situation. You all saw what's going on in China. The lockdown in Shanghai is so horrible. Okay, the last little bit is these posters is very relevant today, and but it's 70 years ago. And still today, most Chinese people still believe COVID-19, the virus, is from the United States. And they brought to China secretly and infected all the Chinese. And so they can fight it, they can win. Because Mao famously said, human being will become victorious, fight with God. Because God didn't make the world perfect. We have to correct God's mistake. And this is the same thing. The virus is natural virus. Manpower, we can zero it. So that's what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will be provocative to make this discussion lively. The first book I read about China It was in 1991. It was about the coming collapse of China. It was written right after Tiananmen, and the book was about China having so many economic, social, and political problems that it will collapse in a few years, just as the Soviet Union. And ever since that, there has been many books and articles about this Chinese bubble or the Chinese paper tiger or whatever, but it just did not happen so far. And if we consider China to be a paper tiger, then why do we care so much about China? If we consider China as not being innovative and being unable to innovate new things, then why everybody in the West is scared of Chinese companies like high-tech companies like Huawei? Why do we see China as a threat? Isn't it just some kind of wishful thinking that China is a paper tiger? And I would also like to ask Ádám if he agrees with this statement that China's economy is a paper tiger.
Thank you for this question. I'm an external observer, so I'm not an insider. But that is a huge intellectual challenge to answer to your first question. Why there is the CCP still in power? I mean, why there is no an opposition party? Because in China, as Ms. Schoolland kindly showed us, this beautiful picture of these megacities, megapolises, there are huge varieties of coffee, for example, coffee shops. So people are getting used to more and more the variety of choices, the supply. But there is only one party. And I think it's a huge intellectual challenge to answer that. Regarding the question of the economic case and the lack of innovation, I do think that Chinese economy is starting more and more innovative. As, for example, the Huawei case. Google, Android started to offer its ecosystem to the new Huawei mobile phones, but they introduced their own operating software very, very fastly. I mean, just in a couple of years, which many people mentioned, I mean, the experts, that would be almost impossible to be so innovative like this. So I think this is a very mixed picture at the same time. And this is my last remark for this question, but I see that many Chinese students in the States, for example, when I first attended the American Economic Association annual conference in Atlanta, I was surprised that in the PhD session there were only Chinese participants. You are laughing, but I was really, really surprised. So I think that there's a huge intellectual power within the Chinese expatriates who are studying abroad in UK, in the States. And what I see that in the statistics, more and more decide to not to return to China. And I think that is a very bad reply for those who remained in China. Thank you.
Yes, that's true. A lot of Chinese students all over the world. I think in the United States, it's the biggest export is the education. And there's so many Chinese students, and they are very good students. My generation, I came out of China as a graduate student. I didn't go back because I didn't want to go back. But then later on, especially early 2000, a lot of Chinese students, after they studied, they went back because they thought they can do something. It's easier to be hired and promoted in China. But I knew many of them, everybody's regret it because they couldn't do anything. Their hands and feet are tied. They are educated, they have different opinion, they cannot talk about it. And very often these people ask me, Lee, help us. How can we go back to United States as a visiting scholar or whatever? Can you help us? And because they regret it, they went back. And also, don't forget, China has 1.4 billion people. So very, very small percentage of Chinese left China. And but to the world seems a lot. You see, you felt like you see Chinese everywhere, but that's very small percentage. There's a misconception. I didn't think it was the West that much, but in China, the reason they sacrificed Hong Kong is because they thought China doesn't need Hong Kong. Hong Kong is the number one or two, the most it had most economic freedom in the world. And the economic power in Hong Kong is just always at the top of the world. And the reason for that is Hong Kong has rule of law. The investors, the banks, they're there because they know their money is protected. And Xi Jinping thought, we don't need Hong Kong because we have Shenzhen. Shenzhen has as much beautiful buildings and infrastructures as Hong Kong. So why do we need Hong Kong? But he didn't understand. China has no rule of law. I talked to people, the bankers in Hong Kong when I visit them. They said, we're not going to move to Shenzhen. And if we cannot stay in Hong Kong, we just leave. Now you see so many businesses are leaving Hong Kong, but they're not moving to China because after all, it's their money. They're not going to somewhere have no human right, no rule of law, and they don't know when the government is going to put them in prison or confiscate their businesses or wealth. It just, one example, Jimmy Lai, he has a big business in China, the fashion stores, and 5,000 employees, just because he donated a tank to the students during the 1989 movement. Government was taking his business away. He didn't want his 5,000 plus employee become jobless. He said, I leave the business, no longer mine. And he gave the business to his managers. And so he saved the business in China, no longer his. Then he went to Taiwan and started his media business, Apple Daily. So nothing is protected. And the West sometimes don't forget about that, especially government officials or scholars. Because if you are the real business person, your money is there, you will know you don't choose China, you don't trust China, and China is not the same as Hungary. Just another example, Shanghai is the richest city in China and most developed, and have 180,000 foreigners live in Shanghai alone. And government, one lockdown, also again, lockdown is different definition, Chinese style lockdown and your lockdown. 5 days later, everybody was just focusing on fight to get the potato and the cabbage because they were starving. Regardless how big your house and you have the most expensive cars, you can't go out, you can't drive, you can't go anywhere. You're just sitting home waiting to die. So the Chinese government want to tell people in Shanghai, this is very political. Why they chose Shanghai? Not because Shanghai had the most infected patients. It's just because they want to show Shanghai, you're economic powerful, you're arrogant. I want to show you who's the boss. The first they did Shenzhen, now they did Shanghai. It's all politics. And Deng Xiaoping already showed the world and the Chinese people what is most important. That answers your question, why the Chinese Communist Party is still there. Because the party is more important than people's life, than the economy. And the world already warned Deng Xiaoping, if you kill the students, you kill the people, we're going to have economic sanction and this and that. Nobody cares in the top level government. We want to preserve our power. Let be economic recession, going backwards, human life got killed, doesn't matter. Not important. Xi Jinping showed us more of that. Earlier, you talked about a school opened in China. Just 2 weeks ago, Harvard School of London forced to change their name, no longer allowed to call Harvard School. Howard School, China, they give them a Chinese name, whatever, very, very Chinese name. And you can't really, you don't have sovereignty anymore, whatever. I have too much to talk, so.
Well, you give a very bleak picture of China, but my question is how it is still working. I would like to know that nobody actually starved to death in Shanghai. I have dozens of friends in Shanghai. They have problems. They eat a lot of carrots. But I mean, all these compound communities, they live together with Chinese. They order food on the internet and they get something. They are not starving to death. And you won't see 20 million people die in Shanghai. You can be sure of that. But apart from that, my question is that how is it possible that if the picture is so bleak and people are so poor in China and the government is controlling everything, that the country is still working, it is still developing. You cannot deny that it is developing. The fact you said that there are 43 million poor people in China can be interpreted as a very wonderful achievement, because it has never happened in the history of China that so few people were actually under the poverty line, even if it's probably more. But 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 40 years ago, it was something like 99%. So you can see some development. If everything is so bad, then how is the system still working? And why we are so afraid of China? Why do we call it a systemic rival? Why do we start a trade war against China? Why do we treat it as the next Russia, if it's a paper tiger?
Very good question. Like I said, China is a planned or direct economy, and everybody follows, all the development followed what Xi Jinping, they're guessing what Xi Jinping wants. I give you some examples. About 7 years ago, or 6 years ago, Xi Jinping, in one of his talks, he said we need to urbanize China. So people start guessing, all the investors, actually government businesses, people, guessing what the Xi Jinping really saying. Okay, we're supposed to build cities because urbanization is change villages to cities, farm to cities. So they start to build cities. One of my friends was so proud and telling me and want me to get involved as they're building a medical city. I said, what does medical city mean? We have Chinese herbal stores and acupuncturists and care homes and hospitals. I said, you mean all the patients and doctors and nurses live in that city? They said, yeah. I said, why? What about the people who the doctors and nurses, their children, where do they go to school? Where do they shop? Is there a theater for them and schools? Oh, we don't care. We just want to preserve Chinese herbal medicine at the same time build a city. I said, what if nobody moved there? You fail. He said, but we already make money building it. I said, isn't that a waste? They said, oh, the money didn't leave China. From one government group of governments' hand, like the banks, and to the other government business people's hand. So the money's still in China. That's the way of thinking. They said it's still in China. We didn't lose anything. That's why it's developing. China is developing. There's a lot of construction going on, building something. There's no plan and no responsibilities. And my cousin, who are two cousins, one is architect, one is musician. They both are hired by the government as a consultant to build a musical city. I said, what's musical city? Oh, we will build all the studios and theaters and art galleries for all the artists and musicians to live there. I said, why do they want to live there? Oh, it's convenient because they're near other artists. I said, why you think you can tell people where to live? They said, oh, they're so proud because they got hired by the government as a consultant to build Music City. And like you say, Huawei is very good with their technology, but their technology mainly used for civilians and for the Chinese government used as a tool to spy on their citizens. It's not the technology, new technology is now the new focus of Chinese government. It's not for enhance people's standard of life or become more convenient. It's just because the Chinese government can use it to monitor you, to track you, the social credit system. And also, after the urbanization rush to build cities, this year, Xi Jinping had new thoughts, said, new order, said China have to guarantee it has 180 billion hectares of farmland. And among these farmland, 800 billion hectares have to be prime farmland. So this was happening this year. And suddenly we see a lot of videos showing crops or vegetables growing out of parking lot or cement road, abandoned road. We thought, oh, what kind of new technology? Finally, we realized because they don't have enough farmland. But Xi Jinping said we have to have this many farmland. So the local officials start to put topsoil on parking lots and the roads to plant some lettuce, not really crops because the soil was too shallow, but because the pandemic, no central government officials will come and actually check. They send drones to see, oh, you have a lot of greens. Oh, you qualify. So the top lies, every level lies to everybody. So they all learn how to cheat the central government. So those are activities, productions, and there's ridiculously wasting productions. And so I think, yeah, this is still producing GDPs, creating GDPs, because they're not benefiting for any really day-to-day living or people's lives.
Okay, thank you very much. I think our time is over. So thank you for Zhao Schoolland and Ádám Kerényi for sharing their thoughts with us. We started an interesting discussion. We could not finish it because of the time limit, but I hope we could give some insight into the Chinese economy. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.